Hi, welcome back for another episode of Let's Talk About It. Join with me today is Mandy Neely. She is a senior security engineer at a healthcare organization, and in previous roles, she's worked in IAM at Okta and as a SOC engineer at an MSP. Today, she is here so we can chat a little bit more about how to approach automation as a concept and as a strategy. Welcome to the podcast, Mandy.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here and get to hang out with you a little bit more.
So, to tee us up, I thought that we could start by having you describe what your dream automation scenario would be. Because I think in order to talk about how we need to get there, we need to know where we're going. So, if you could organize your own SOC and have everything be exactly as you wanted it to be, what would that automation look like?
I think before I even get into like what the automation part of it looked like, I could have a library of documentation. The idea of automating whatever I could is wonderful. But what happens if I built all of that and I'm not there tomorrow? Then all of my automation is maybe useless, maybe not. It's a little bit like Schrodinger's cat. So if we don't know what's already in place, we don't know what we can build on top of it. So perfect world, I would have a library of documentation over everything that we have currently configured. The next big dream upon a dream is thorough error handling. I think a lot of people might steer away from air handling because it can be a little disheartening to see failures all the time. But it's not like you did, the engineer creating it didn't fail. It's your task did not pass. And you need to know that and you need to act on it. And maybe you can have automated actions and everything. So those are the two big things that coming into an environment I would want to look at, like, hey, what do we have documented for what we've got configured? And how many different ways can I break what we've got configured? And that's where the errors would come in.
Yeah, I think people rarely stop to slow down that much, which is exactly why I want to have this conversation. Because when you're approaching it from a point of having a little bit of automation, a partial automation set up, and you're wanting to go more fully autonomous, those are the things that you need to do, right, in order to tee up your success. And I think a lot of times it's an issue where we're always trying to iterate and push and go next and release a new feature and do the next thing. And very rarely are we stopping to slow down to be like, okay, let's actually write this down so that we can future proof ourselves for if somebody else were to come in and take over.
Yeah. And it's very common that now the people building those automations aren't going to be working by themselves most of the time. You're working with a team. And one, we're human. We're probably going to have mistakes that aren't going to be found until another set of eyes look at it. But you also need to make sure that your teammates understand what you've done. Because what if they were halfway through building a similar automation and now you guys are just going to stack on top of each other because neither of you are actually talking? So documentation and air handling really helps cover those both of those bases.
Okay. And now what about like actually getting into the automation?
I love seeing automation in one platform if possible, so you
Mm-hmm.
don't have to hunt across different things, like D3. If I had to look through my D3 tenant for something and it wasn't there, and I had to go look through Tines and I couldn't find it there, and the more time I am wasting trying to hunt down where these are, could be detrimental. So perfect world, have it all in one area with a common naming scheme, common patterns for how you actually just common development standards that your team is actually upholding. That's another dream on a dream. Because everything always moves fast and we're, as you said, trying to constantly iterate on it. So consistent naming schemes, errors being handled, documentation, actually getting into the meat and potatoes of it. I am a huge fan of low programming automations, like some of those platforms I named. But if we are going to get into a specific language and everything, put everything in a repo. and build
Mm.
your tags and build the structure that you can stand up the rest of your environment on before you start throwing 100 scripts into this. So I don't even like suggesting like going super technical, go everything, build out a GitLab pipeline that will build everything. Start with the basics, figure out your tags, make it easy to search. Like think of how your teammates are going to be doing, looking and using this tool with you.
Yeah, that naming convention one I feel is like actually so important because especially when you're thinking about working at an MSSP or MSPs who have hundreds of clients and are dealing with like hundreds of alerts a day and you're running so many different playbooks. If you don't have the right naming conventions for the right clients and the right playbooks, it's gonna be wild.
Yeah. Yeah. That
Yeah,
have the argument over like camel case versus snake case versus all the other different kinds of cases early on so it doesn't lead to confusion down the line.
for sure. So when we're talking about maybe a little bit further into the process, and we have an MSSP or a large organization who has a little bit of automation, some partial automation, maybe they've automated just the ingestion bit. Um, I guess I want to know what you think is stopping organizations from achieving full autonomy.
I put together a talk actually where we got to meet was at S.E.C.U.R.E.'s Cloud Security Summit where I gave a talk on automate or stagnate and how I like to approach automation as a concept. Um, and I broke it down into just these key points. And it's got a very silly mnemonic to help everybody remember it. So you think about secure automation. Let's break down the word secure. Each letter, start with an existing process. So many times I've seen a team that is usually maybe a little away from the engineers working the problem come in with a problem statement. And they maybe don't have all the details worked out. They just figured they're going to give their engineers the info and the engineers can work it out. If you start the automation process before you've really figured out what you're trying to solve for, that's how you fall into scope creep. That's how you end up with an automation that maybe isn't going to cover bases in a secure and organized manner. Start with a process that you know the steps to. For like a very easy example, password reset. Somebody comes in and says, I need my password reset. You would start with identifying the user, confirming the user's identity, resetting the password, and then because you are a wonderful customer service engineer, you are going to confirm that their new password works or that they got their password reset or anything like that. You have these steps in mind that you can follow. I think one of the common barriers for a lot of maybe not immature SOCs, but maybe some a department that's still trying to figure out a path, is they get so excited about all these fun platforms and capabilities that a tool might have that they forget about the basics, the building blocks of how we build strong automation. And we think of that through secure automation. So we did the S, which was streamline or start with existing processes. The next one I've already kind of covered, which was error handling and alerting. That's one part I didn't say before. So alerting, you need to not only know when your errors are being handled, you need to get alerts for it.
You need to get
So
accurate alerts for that and not a
accurate.
thousand false positives that you can't sort through.
Yes. So you have to tune your alerts. And that's a fantastic point. And one of my slides from that is you can always tune an alert. You still have to configure it first to be able to get to the tuning stage.
Yeah.
So the next letter in my silly mnemonic was continuous process optimization. And you touched on this earlier a little bit with that we're constantly trying to evolve and find the next iteration of a tool. Do that with your team. Like a department shouldn't be just being given the orders to the engineers. It should be a conversation amongst the engineers for like, hey, I actually know how to do that in like a API call. We don't have to have this weird drawn out process that a bunch of departments are being brought in for. We can improve this. Good tools never stay on version 1. You need to constantly be evolving and working with your team to actually figure out what needs to be better or like what's okay for your guys' use case. The next one is unified team understanding. This is where SECU. If your team doesn't understand what you've done, they may be working over you. They may not be utilizing something that you put a lot of time into, and it could be helping their day along. So you want to make sure that your team understands what you've already built so they can assist you with other things, and they can use the tools that you put all this time into. The next one is risk awareness. You need to understand what risks are actually facing your environment, your tenants, what tools are in your stack. You need to understand what we are trying to protect against. And then the last one, and I think this is honestly the biggest one, is effective data management. And this is a organization level conversation. Everybody needs to be using the same language across the organization. Otherwise, any sort of automation isn't going to play super well in your tenant. For example, if you are under a certain department, and that's in your department attribute in your user profile, and I'm in a certain department, but that's under my team attribute in my user profile, it's not going to play well together. So
Yeah.
everybody needs to be operating off of the same Rosetta Stone before you can actually start to build these cool, really fancy automations. So to sum up my silly little mnemonic there, back to basics. Everybody needs to slow down a little bit.
Yeah. And that's so hard because building blocks and basics are not sexy. Nobody likes
Yeah.
that. We want to skip over that. Let's get to the good shit, but it's so important.
Yes. And you're completely right. It's a very common uh thing in security. We had some conversations about how identity isn't as sexy as pen testing, but
Hmm.
identity is the perimeter of functional security. Like building blocks aren't fun, but you
Yeah.
can't go fast until you can do those parts. So I think a lot of people need to have a champion on their team who reminds them, nope, we need to have a naming standard. We need to have peer reviews. We need to expose the entire team to this and maybe just be the squeaky wheel that
Yeah.
says, hey, we haven't done this part yet.
Yeah. And I think there's another piece in this too, in that a lot of organizations feel that they do have the basics down and they're ready for to approach automation. But you really have to ask yourself these questions that you're saying to make sure that you do, because it's really easy, yeah, to just skip over the basics and just go straight for the sexy parts. Nothing about building the automation is hot. It's just
Yes.
the automation is hot, but building the automation is super not.
And I think a lot of people just expect you to kind of like pull a script out from behind your back or something. No, some maybe of the non-technical executives and members on the team hold their hand through the process of you developing automation in a stable fashion and go from there.
Yeah, I think it's also all about time. Like automation really is in place to save you time, but it is going to take you time to build that automation. So it's really like a battle of where you're spending your time and how you want to think about your future. And I think with automation and AI, and as this grows, right, it's not something that you can ignore anymore. It's like you need it in order to be a fully functioning SOC and to have a very secure organization. You need some kind of automation to handle all of the alert volume, all of the everything that's getting thrown at you, because threats are evolving. And so you're going to need
Yes.
more to iterate on that. And it's
I
not realistic to hire like hundreds of SOC engineers to handle all
mhm.
this, especially
You're
not when you have the tools available to get things done.
You're completely right. Like, you can have an engineer at your organization who's a genius and can automate everything away and like has an answer for everything that comes up. Okay, then your resource is that person's time. Are you going to
That
run
one
them
person.
ragged?
Yeah.
Yeah, trying to do everything because you're trying to clone them via automation. They still have to build all of that. But I really love your point of like we can't escape it. I had a metaphor that I used during my talk at the summit, which I stole from Erin Crow at AWS because I just loved it so much during her talk. And it was used to be, I kind of saw automation as eating our veggies. It was good for you, but it wasn't the end of the world if you missed it. every now and then. Now it is more akin to wearing your seatbelt.
Yeah.
Like you could get out safe
Yeah.
without it,
But you're
but
being dumb if you're not using it.
your chances of not being safe are exponentially higher.
Yeah.
And it's the last line of my talk was, so please wear your seatbelt because
Yeah.
we have to do it at this day and age. Everything moves too fast, and you will burn your engineers out if you do not set up a strong and sustainable automation process early on.
Yeah. And I like your point as well about going slowly because I guess in my mind I'm thinking like, oh, we're going from partial automation to fully autonomous and it's gonna be a flip, like we're just gonna all decide, like, let's get on this train, we're going. But it's not that. It's like it's a little bit here, a little bit here, a little bit here, and then all of a sudden you've got that full autonomy.
hmm Back when I worked at the MSP, I would deploy our EDR solutions, and frequently we would build out the OUs and everything, and we would deploy in detect mode. I'm talking about Sentinel-1 deployments for the record. You can
Yeah.
deploy in detect, and then you can flip to your policy to protect when you're ready. We would deploy in detect mode, and then we would have like a week where we would tune and build exclusions and talk to people about how things are running, basically. Oh, that particular server's slow. Let me go look at the resource utilization and go from there. And once we got through that first step of we deployed in not protect, just detect, and we did some tuning, talk to users and everything. Once we get through that stage, we would flip our policies to protect, but we would do it in OU by OU as needed. So we're not going to flip like your domain controllers and your accounting department at the same time. We're going to do one at a time, make sure everything is going smoothly. Because if we did everything at once, we could start to have problems from everything. If we did one at a time, move our way through. And then we would have the alerts that would come from this stage. Maybe we still need to build some exclusions and talk to more people. How are resources being handled? And just having a step through deployment made the overall trajectory of the deployment faster rather than just deploy once, flip into protect as fast as possible, and tune from there. If you go slow as you go through all the steps, you're likely going to be lessening your overall time on that effort.
Yeah, for sure. And it's a lot of effort, I think, to
Yeah,
get that done.
a lot of people to talk to, everything starts to blur together after a while too. So
Yeah.
going slow helps break that up.
Yeah. I want to ask you, I guess, a question that I think is a bit tricky, and it's how to measure the ROI of your automation. Because I guess if you're guessing about what your dream scenario would be after you've achieved this automation, you're not sure about what the outcomes are, you're not sure how to measure it. How would you suggest measuring automation in terms of getting people to realize the value of the investment into it?
So, I what immediately jumps to mind is that first letter in my silly mnemonic was streamline existing processes. Um, Part of that is so you can define the scope before you put too much time into developing a wandering trail. Um, if you define the scope early on, you can also include like details about how long it takes you to do this thing manually, or like how long it's taken historically to accomplish a certain task. If you're defining that before you even start working on the new automation behind it, you have it pre-built in. And that's part of why that was my first letter in that mnemonic is have to start with actually figuring out your scope, knowing your process, and because then you can improve upon it. If we streamline a process that I tried to automate a year ago or something, I will probably have different thoughts about what I can make better than I did a year ago. Ticket trails are very, very important. A lot of people will just like throw their script into a ticket and be like, good. No, maybe add some details about how you got to that, any sort of peer reviews, who else may have looked at it. Just having that in the ticket. So when you forget everything about it months later, you can just have it told to you by yourself. I find
Yeah.
that to be very helpful. But
Yeah.
as like an org, go ahead.
Oh, it's also like important for compliance to
Yeah.
understand all of the steps. Like in case anything happens and you need to go back and say like this is exactly what happened with the ticket, you need to be able to do that.
Yeah. And like if I left tomorrow and somebody tried to figure out what I was doing, having some ticket notes would be helpful.
Yeah.
Um, for like larger teams, how can we make sure we are actually building things that will give us a return on investment? My number one thing for that might just be because I have worked in some larger enterprises in a smaller team of engineers that um, my first instinct is to say, talk to the engineers. They will be able to tell you if there's certain parts of their day that aren't like, no, that hasn't got any better since we built that one thing that was supposed to make this better. If anything, it is still a problem for me. Okay. That's an easy answer. For like standard business processes, uh, you can check how many ticket password resets. Check how many password reset tickets were closed in 1 month compared to last month, and compare the rates from there. Average time on tickets supported. That's more for like help desk sort of metrics. If we are looking at trying to think of like a good
I was going to say like
generic,
maybe the SLA for responding to the incident is too long and you need to reduce that by 50%. Like that's your problem. And so you're looking at like the time per ticket, you're looking at all of these different metrics and trying to measure the ROI that way, I guess.
yeah, that's a great one.
Yeah.
I think that's a great place to start. Ticket metrics can really be your friend. That's not just use your tickets for documenting your development. Putting error messages in your tickets can
Yeah.
also kind of help pinpoint building some new statuses for your tickets if you need a little bit more granularity into a dashboard or something. Um, Identify the points that you are trying to track and make sure you can build it into your ticket trail.
Yeah, for sure. Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Mandy, for coming on the show. I really appreciate that. I think it's a great way to approach automation and think of it as like a concept and not just a thing or like something that you have to do. And to be purposeful about how people are implementing automation is really important, I think. So that's great. Thank you so much.
Yes,
If
thanks for
we
inviting me.
if we want to find you and what you're working on online, where can we look?
LinkedIn. If you just search me up by Mandy Neely, I am available there.
Okay, great.
Um,
I'll
I'm
put the
also
link to your profile in the show notes in case anybody is going to be looking for that. So you can check that out if you want that.
awesome, and thank you so much for inviting me on. It was great to meet you in Toronto, and great to check in with you a little bit later. One last thing I will say is for all of the identity professionals out there, there is an organization that is dedicated to identity professionals, ID Pro. They put out a ton of great work, and they're just some of the most supportive people in the industry I know. And yeah, it's a good place to hang out and mature in your identity career.